I wanted to show how I reused my clear ballistics gel blocks. I get a lot of questions on this, and surprisingly a lot of people have a lot of misinformation about these things. The main point of this is that they're reusable. They're reusable pretty much as many times as you want to reuse them, as far as being remeltable and everything like that. They do start to change color after a while. They kind of get yellowish just from the heating process and cleaning and all of that. But, you know, they'll work for a long time, and a lot of people think that they're like super expensive, and I guess it depends on what you consider expensive. They run about 70 bucks a piece. Now I just got some recently buy two get one free sale, and I ended up paying like 200 bucks because shipping is really expensive on this stuff. That's the big thing. These things weigh like 17 pounds a piece, so even when you buy two of them, you're looking at a pretty high shipping charge, but it is very much reusable. And I find that to be very convenient for it to be reusable, and you can reuse a whole bunch of times. So what I want to do is I want to show my methods of recycling this stuff and how I do it, because I've been doing this for about a year and a half, and I'm actually still learning, but I've recycled probably, I don't know, blocks of these about 100 times. I have purchased about 25 to 30, 35 blocks of this, something like that. I have a lot of blocks, and my first blocks I got are really brown because I didn't really understand what I was doing, and I put a lot of effort into recycling a lot of them, so I got to the point where I figured out how to do this a lot easier. So here's some channels here, and some of this has like burning in it, and that's something we got to look out for. And I got some cuts in here. I'm taking the bullets out, and I personally use the MDF, the medium density fiber board, so this makes it actually harder than, you know, the typical person would have to deal with. But I'll show what I do here. So first thing I do is I just start cutting. Now the knife is a big deal. I've tried probably 20 different styles of knives trying to get a knife that would cut through this, and very few work. You know, even if it's got a sharp blade, it's like taking a dull knife and trying to cut through this, and I'm like straining my shoulder trying to cut through it. And the knives that work the best are the ones with the micro serrations on it. Even the full-size serrations don't cut very well if it's all full serrations. The micro serrations, and I found that about an 8-inch knife that goes from one side to the other is the easiest. So actually, let me start where I already have some cuts here. I'll show what I do. So I'm going to pull one end like this, because as you cut through it, you want to pull the material away from the blade so that you don't have a ton of friction on it. If you just leave it there like this, you're dealing with a ton of friction. You pull it this way, you just kind of do that. And what I'll do is I'll cut through most of the way through, and then I'll stop, and I'll do that right here as well. I'll show what I do. I'm going to do a few more cuts. I generally like to section this off into like 6 pieces, so I'll cut most of the way through, stop most of the way through. You can see how easy this cuts as long as you spread that part with the micro serration knife. You're probably already guessing what I'm doing here. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to look to where I just cut, and I'm going to cut like this. Look for the line where I've already cut and just pull it while I cut it. That way, I'm not sawing into my table. Pretty simple, huh? Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 sections here. This is normally how I do it. I break it up into about 6 sections here. And how many bullets did I put through this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. About 7 bullets. Now you can see right here, this is actually burnt gel. That's dieseling. Generally, I just simply clean all the channels out, but the dieseled ones you cannot clean out. I mean, you can, and you can remelt that, but it'll brown your gel prematurely. So I'll show what I do here really quick. So I'm just going to cut through the channels as I see them here. And because I use MDF, I like to take and just push them out like this. And we can see right here, that's dieseling. I'll show you what I do here for that. Basically, I'm going to cut through the middle of this here. I'm going to grab a different tool. Now that I've cut through it right there, if you got a lot of dieseling or a lot of debris like that, I just simply take my shears here and just cut it away. I'll get rid of that. Now, if you do this enough, you might want to add back to it, or else your blocks can get shorter and shorter and shorter. But you can do this actually for quite a while before you even notice a difference, because even if you do this 20 pieces like this, it only lowers the length, the height of the block by like a 1/4 inch or something like that. So I'm gonna cut this up, and if I have any issues in here, I'll come back, but I'll show you what I do after I cut this all up. Alright, I've got all my channels cut up and everything out, and this is all that's left, and it might look like a lot because it fluffs up, but it's really, you know, it's a tiny amount. It's less than whatever this is, probably, you know, half of this. Probably that right there is all that's right there. So I could add more to that, but I don't necessarily feel the need to, because by the time it shortens enough from removing it, it's already starting to turn kind of yellowish from the remelts. It kind of doesn't even make any sense at that point. So I'm going to show you what I do now. All right, now I'm going to wash it in my kitchen sink. I do that just simply because it fits correctly, and I've removed all of the lead and debris and everything like that and cut away the channels, so it pretty much perfectly fits in my sink. I'll put some hot water in, as hot as I can stand, and I'll put in maybe a tablespoon or two of Dawn dish detergent, and I'll just kind of agitate it around a little bit here. Alright, now I'm just going to, basically I'm going to fill this up to the top, and generally I let it soak, you know, a good hour or so, just because this stuff is a lot like skin, in the sense, like, if you get like slivers in your skin, you can't get them out, you know how you can soak your hand in the bathtub or whatever, and then the stuff pops out. It's exactly the same for like the MDF pieces and stuff like that to get in this. I've generally removed all of them in here, but I left a couple channels just to kind of show, you know, what could potentially happen. So I will come back after this is soaked. All right, now that everything's soaked for a while, basically what I'm doing is I'm moving it from one side of the sink with the soapy water, and I'm moving it over to some clean water for rinsing. I found that this is pretty much the easiest way to do it. All right, I rinsed it out and put some more water in there because we were getting a little bit soapy than what I wanted. But now it's inspection time, where you can just kind of take a look at anytime you find any channels, make sure everything is cleaned out, and just set it up on a dry towel. All right, I get everything rinsed and inspected, you know, to my satisfaction, where I think I got everything. So I'm gonna cinch this towel up here and just gonna give it a little good shake to get some of that water off. I'm gonna transport it over to an area away from animals and stuff like that, because you don't want hair in there, and I'll show you what I do next. All right, so you might see I have a fan here, and I got my gel here. Now this next step is pretty important. It's something that took a while to figure out on my own, but basically probably most of you are like me. You're a rural person and your water isn't particularly clean. There's iron in it and stuff like that. And what I found is if you don't get the water off it quickly, it can kind of turn the gel orange prematurely, even if you dry it well, even if it's completely dry. So I will take every piece and I'll roll it, and I'll make sure that all that water droplets are off as best of my abilities. That's really, really important. And another thing that's really, really important is basically water in the gel, when you melt it, can ruin the gel. Basically turns it like rock hard. So this is my final inspection, and I'm inspecting all of these, but I'm also inspecting them for, in addition to like maybe spots I missed, I'm looking for like crevices where maybe I've cut through it and water is being held in the gel somewhere, and I'm knocking off all the excess water here. So I'm gonna melt this stuff tomorrow, and I'm gonna show you the whole process with this particular gel block. I'm not gonna use a different one or anything like that, because I want to kind of preserve the quality of this video of my process. So, you know, if there's any crevices that are, you know, more than like a 1/2 inch deep or maybe a 1/4 inch deep, they can hold water. Knocking off all this water here, and I'm spacing it out because I don't want any pieces that are going to be touching each other, because, you know, if that's the case, they're not going dry. So anytime I see big droplets of water. I'm flipping this over, pulling those droplets out. I'm checking for creviced areas like this is pretty deep. Pull it apart. Checking for anything I might need to re-clean or cut out dieseling. And once I get everything kind of situated the way I want it, turn this fan on. And, you know, depending on what method you use, it's going to depend on how long it takes to dry. Like if you got a lot of crevices and you're not sure if you got all the water out of the crevices, you probably want to let it dry a couple days. If you got all the crevices opened up, you know, probably one day. If you completely cut through every channel and you have no crevices because you completely cut it all out with the scissor method, you could potentially remelt this stuff in 10 minutes. So, but just because I put crevices in this, cutting through it and kind of washing some of it out, I'm gonna let this run about maybe 16 hours, and tomorrow we'll melt this and we'll edit that in here and I'll show you the methods after that. All right, it's been about 18 hours, so I'm gonna take my mold here, and what I normally do is I put the smallest pieces in first, simply because generally all of this doesn't fit, so it's a lot easier when you're adding to it to add big pieces to it after the fact. So I'm just gonna inspect these, make sure there's no water on there, and I'm gonna fill this up as much as I can with these little pieces, and then we're gonna move over to the garage and I'll show you how I melt this. All right, so what I've got here is just a standard turkey roaster, and there's usually liners in it. I take that out, and then I just put this right in here. Now you don't have to spray the mold with anything to prevent sticking or whatever. You just want to make sure that this is never higher than the level of the mold, because it'll melt over down into that and burn and smoke. And the standard lids don't fit, so I just put on one of these aluminum pans, and I just kind of stretched it out to fit and taped the lid on there. And this is what I've been doing for a while. Works perfectly fine. So I usually run about 275 to 300 degrees. I believe Clear Ballistics says don't go over 275, but I ran it at 300 and it's never been an issue. So I'm gonna plug that in. Basically just gonna leave that sit there for, you know, a while. Generally it takes about 6 hours or so for it to melt. This depends on the outside weather. You know, like in the garage here, it's summertime, so it'll melt a little quicker than if it was wintertime, just from the ambient heat around here. But I'm gonna come back in about 2 hours, because at that point it'll be all smushed down enough I can add the remainder of that gel into that. But total time is gonna be about 6 hours. So we'll come back when that's done. So it's been about an hour, and what I put in there that was to the top is basically sunk down. So just as I go along, I'll put more in there, and just making sure that it doesn't sit over the top of the lead of the edge there. So anything that'll fit at the time, I'll put in there. That's a little too tall, and of course you can tear it, but this is definitely a thing of patience here, because you can't just necessarily put it all in there at the same time. So I'll tear it up to get it small enough that it's not gonna go over the top there, to fit as much as I can. So I got a few more pieces left to put in here, and I will do that throughout the course of the day, and probably got another maybe 5 hours on this before it's done. All right, so it's been about 5.5 hours or so. It's not completely melted yet, but I just want to kind of give an idea of what you see along the way. The center here isn't melted at all. You can kind of see like weird little bubbles in there that are like big chunks of it, and then on top we have a bunch of little bubbles. So that's probably going to take another about 2 hours or so, and that'll be completely melted, and at that point we'll just shut it off. So I will be back in a couple hours. All right, it's been about 7.5 hours, and this is basically completely melted. You see a little bit of bubbles in there, but the thing is with this stuff, is that it will continue to melt even after you turn the heat source off, because you know there's 17 pounds of hot liquid here. So as long as most of the big bubbles are gone, and you might see little itty bitty bubbles down there a little bit, you know, a couple inches down, that'll melt. That'll completely melt on its own. And you might see debris in there. I think I see a little bit of something in there. I'm not gonna mess with it just because, you know, it's kind of hard to get that stuff out sometimes. But pretty much we're done. And basically what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna turn this off, and I'm gonna leave it, basically, I'm just gonna clean that up there. I'm gonna leave it cool naturally on its own. And if you try to cool it too quickly, you'll see a weird effect happen where like the top of it will bow down in the center right here, and you'll have this very deep scoop in it right there. Like I'm talking 2 to 3 inches deep going down into it, which is not good. And the way to prevent that from happening is to let it cool slowly. I'm gonna let it cool slowly anyway because we still have a couple little tiny bubbles there. So it's gonna take a long time for that to cool. So I'm gonna unplug this. I have a light bulb there. Well, I'll plug it back in for the rest of this. I have a light bulb there to indicate that my heater's plugged in. But basically I'm gonna unplug it. I'm gonna leave it set. I'm not gonna take it out of that roaster at all. I'm just gonna turn the roaster off. And basically, you know, 12, 16 hours later, it's gonna be basically cool enough to pull out of there. Now, if you wanted it cooler faster, what you could do would be to simply let it cool the way I'm doing now, just leave it in that roaster, and maybe like 6 hours later take it out and then put fans on it. And that's probably what I'm gonna do tonight, so that it'll be cool enough to pull out of the pan tomorrow. So that's basically all you gotta do. We're pretty much done, other than we're gonna take this heat gun here tomorrow and we're gonna use this on the surface of that to get the surface smoothed out and get fingerprints out and marks from the mold out and all of that. So stay tuned, we'll be back tomorrow morning. All right, now on to our last part of this process. And you're gonna need a heat gun. This one, I don't know what the watts are on it, but I ordered it directly from Clear Ballistics. It says 1500 watt. Actually, I looked all over for something like this. I looked at Home Depot, Lowe's, Harbor Freight. Nobody sells heat guns apparently, but I got one at Clear Ballistics. And this next step, what you gotta do is to remove the gel from the block. And it's funny because a lot of people say this is the hardest part, and there's actually videos of people doing a lot of weird things trying to get this out. This is actually the easiest part. All you gotta do, it's more of a technique thing. So basically all I do is I'm gonna press down all around it just to kind of loosen the edges here around that block. And the biggest trick here is you want to put it about thigh level, waist level if you can, so that you can put your upper body weight down into it. It's very simple. So you're just gonna kind of worm your hands in as far as you can at the top by putting this thing vertically, and then just kind of pull it down a little bit here, a little bit there, until you get your hands in there. And then all you do is start going like this. Just start pulling a little bit in kind of a quick motion. And once you get it to there, you're pretty much home free. You just grab in there and pull it out. That's that. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna shine up this block. There's pretty much two methods for doing this. There's the one that I use, and it's pretty much just you go over the block really quick to get out fingerprints, and you just kind of shine up the whole block that way, and I'll show you here. Another thing you can do is, a lot of times you get these little pieces on here, take these off because they'll kind of melt kind of funny into it. But if you wanted to just simply take the fingerprints off, I'm gonna put some fingerprints on here. So close enough block you can see. If you get like fingerprints on it, stuff like that, and it gets kind of hazy looking. See that? I'm gonna try to get this at the right light angle. Basically, all you gotta do to get that out is to just go like this for a few seconds. Don't get too close to it. Basically like that. That's all you gotta do for that. However, if you want that really crystal clear looking gel, what you basically have to do is you have to melt like the whole surface of it and do it on a horizontal top like that. And let me get this to an angle where you can kind of see the light and what's happening here. I'm going to melt this. I'm going to go on kind of fast forward so that you don't have to watch all of that, but you'll kind of see the process take form. And also when I'm doing this, don't get too close. If you're going to be within 2 inches or so, don't hold it there very long, because if you hold it, it'll start to burn. And another thing what you want to do, it won't catch fire, but it'll start to smoke. Another thing you want to do is when you're trying to melt an area where there might be an imperfection, pull away to your like 6-8 inches away and then keep the heat on it. That way it won't smoke and it will still take care of these marks. So here we go. Basically, I spent like 3 minutes there just liquefying the entire top, and I'm not going to move it around because it'll cause it to run, but it makes it much more crystal clear than if you were just using the fingerprint off method. So here's some fingerprints. You can kind of see them all right there in the front of that, and watch how quickly you can take those off there. That's just the fingerprint off method. That'll make it clear, but it won't make it as clear as liquefying it. And basically all you're going to do, if you're going to liquefy all of them, just do one side, leave it set for 10 minutes or so, and then flip it and do all the sides. And you're pretty much done with your Killer Ballistics block. So that's the finished product of how to recycle it. It's not particularly difficult. So thanks for watching, guys.